Now, in the last half hour or so, we have found out that inflation has fallen to 2.3%.
Which is the lowest level in almost 3 years. It's still slightly above the government's target rate of 2%, though. Let's speak live on Breakfast to the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, who joins us now from North West London. Good morning to you, Chancellor. So it begins with a 2, but it's not quite 2%. You're a bit above it. Are you slightly disappointed this morning that you're still not back at your target?
No, because it's down nearly 1% since the last inflation numbers we had, and it's now lower than the United States or the Eurozone. And for families worried about cost of living pressures, it will be a real relief that inflation has fallen finally to much more normal levels. But however, prices are still much higher than they were a year ago. The level of prices is still higher, which is why we need to continue to stick to the plan to get inflation down to the 2% target. But I think what will encourage those families is that yesterday the International Monetary Fund confirmed that going forward they believe the UK economy will grow faster than France, Germany, Italy or Japan, any other large European country and Japan. So when people are thinking about their prospects, the security of their jobs, the things that can really worry people, whether university graduates are going to get jobs, those signs are really encouraging, and the managing director of the IMF said that the UK is in a good place.
On inflation coming down to 2.3%, it's down to the Bank of England, isn't it? I mean, they're independent of government. You have nothing to do with them. They're the ones who set the interest rates. If anybody gets credit for this fall today, it's them, isn't it?
Well, they certainly have taken action, and we've supported them in that. But the managing director of the International Monetary Fund yesterday said that it was difficult decisions by Rishi Sunak, myself, and the governor of the Bank of England. In particular, in order to support the governor of the Bank of England, we had to take very hard decisions a year and a half ago in that autumn statement, when we had to put up some taxes. Unfortunately, we had to cut some spending plans. And taken together, that has created the environment that has meant that, as she said, the UK is now approaching a soft landing. And that's a very difficult thing to do normally when you have inflation at 11%. The Bank of England was predicting the longest recession in 100 years. We've actually, by the action that all of us have taken, been able to bring down inflation to normal levels. Without that, in fact, living standards have slightly risen over the last year. So I think people will be relieved that that has happened. But in an election year, we'll be saying that, as the country that's created more jobs than nearly anywhere else in Europe, that is because of difficult decisions taken by me and my Conservative predecessors on having a flexible labour market, on getting taxes down where we can, on reforming welfare, that a Labour government would not take. And that is the big choice that we face in an election year.
OK, but let's talk about your predecessors, Kwasi Kwarteng, who was Chancellor under Liz Truss. We've had an email in from our viewer, Chris, this morning, who said, I hope Jeremy Hunt is not going to boast about this as a glowing success of this government. He's saying part of the problem that you are dealing with, that we're all living with, is the Liz Truss, what he calls debacle, and that the inflation that we are still living with shouldn't have got to this point in the first place, that the Conservatives are partly to blame for the situation that you now say you're helping correct.
Well, there were some mistakes made in that mini-budget, and the first thing that I did and Rishi Sunak did was to correct those. But it's wrong to say that those are the main reasons for the pressures that we've been facing. Living standards have actually fallen by more in countries like Germany, Austria and Sweden. And the principal cause of the problems we've been having is a once-in-a-century pandemic, a global 1970s-style energy shock caused by the invasion of Ukraine. And that's caused inflation to go up everywhere, and that's meant that all countries have had very difficult choices. But looking forward, what independent experts like the International Monetary Fund say is not just that the UK has turned a corner, but that our prospects are very good compared to other similar countries. Another measure, very important, is the amount of foreign investment we're getting in, greenfield investment, foreigners wanting to build factories and offices here. And what is happening is we've actually attracted more of that than anywhere else in the world apart from the United States and China since 2010. So foreigners are saying, where do we want to invest our dollars to get the best return? Actually, it's the UK with our incredibly strong technology and life science industries. They see the opportunities here.
You're very keen to talk about the International Monetary Fund and what they say about our economy. Let me point out one other thing that they said in their report. They have warned you against cutting taxes ahead of any election. They're saying the economy can't stand it, that you don't have enough money. Will you bear that in mind in the months ahead?
Well, we actually have a disagreement with them on that point, a respectful disagreement,
well,
because
you can't
we
pick
look
and
around
choose.
the world.
I mean, you say that you agree with the figures.
I know, but let me explain to you why we have a disagreement with the International Monetary Fund on that point. It's because we look around the world and we see that the fastest growing economies in North America and Asia are ones that tend to have lower taxes. But what they said yesterday was they did accept that some tax cuts help growth, and they did understand that the national insurance cuts that we have introduced are going to help fill vacancies and therefore help companies expand. So they weren't against those tax cuts in principle.
So you're going to cut taxes, aren't you? You're going to ignore their warnings and do it before the election.
Well, look what we've done. We have said...
You're going to do it?
Yes, we believe that if we're going... Yeah, well, hang on. We haven't announced that we're going to have another fiscal event this year. We haven't made a decision on that. No, we haven't. We've said that we'll make that decision when the time is right, and it depends on all sorts of other factors as well, John. But we do want to continue on the path of bringing down the tax burden, because that's how we'll grow the economy. And that is one of the big divides in British politics, because Labour have made it clear they don't think we should be bringing down the tax burden. You know, Rachel Reeves did a speech, I think, spoke for more than an hour. She didn't once mention bringing down the tax burden. But when families are facing cost of living pressures, to put an extra £900 into people's pockets on the average salary makes a difference. But most importantly, it's good for growing the economy. And that's why we think it's really important that we do the hard work to keep bringing down taxes.
2 minutes ago, you told us that Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss made mistakes with the economy. And now you are saying that you're prepared, very prepared by the sounds of it, to cut taxes against all the warnings from the IMF. Are you potentially Kwasi Kwarteng 2.0?
No, and I made it very clear, and in fact my record demonstrates, that every time we've cut taxes, it's because we can afford to do it, and we've done it without increasing borrowing. And that was the mistake that Kwasi made. But I think it's very important, if you look back since 2010, at the record of successive Conservative governments, we've actually grown faster than any major European economy. And as we said, the IMF say we will continue to grow faster than any major European economy. And that is because Conservative governments are prepared to take difficult decisions that a Labour government would not. The Labour priority is to increase spending. They haven't funded all their spending plans. We think they would have to put up taxes by about £2,000 a household to do that. That is a big divide in British politics, and we need to have that debate about the future, because this is an election year. And what international commentators say is that the UK economy is in a good place at the moment, and we want to make sure that continues.
Okay, and we'll be speaking to Labour about their plans very shortly. Can I talk to you about the compensation for the infected blood scandal? We've just been joined here by some of the victims on the programme. I know it's a subject that's close to your own heart. You were Health Secretary, of course, yourself. We're hearing a figure of around £10 billion for the total compensation package. Is that the kind of figure you're envisaging having to pay out?
Well, we don't know the final number. We've appointed Sir Robert Francis to chair the organisation that's going to be responsible for giving out the compensation, and we've asked him to give us an estimate, but it may be, it's certainly going to be many billions of pounds, and this is a terrible injustice, and we will, as the Prime Minister said, pay what it takes, and we want to honour the recommendations as to the amounts necessary made by the inquiry.
Some of the victims have told us this morning that they are baffled, confused, disappointed that they haven't got the information and potentially the support going on forward that they were hoping for?
Well, we have given as much information as we're able to that is consistent with the report, but perhaps I could explain to them that one of the things that was made very clear in the report was that the way we take this compensation forward shouldn't just be a decision made by a government minister and the money given out. There needs to be an independent body chaired by someone independent, which Sir Robert Francis certainly will be, and that person needs to go through claims in detail. So it takes longer, but it's fairer. In order to make sure that people get paid as much as possible, as quickly as possible, we're going to do further interim payments, and we're going to get those out as quickly as possible to the people, 4,000 people whose names and addresses we know, but there will be other people who come forward because of knowledge of what's happened, and that will obviously take a little bit longer, but we want to do this as quickly as possible, and there is absolutely no one in government saying slow this down because we don't want to get the money out of the door. We do, but we just want to do it in a way that's consistent with what Sir Brian Langstaff's recommendations were. OK,
just before you go, one last question. One subject we've talked about on the programme quite a lot in the last few weeks is the issue of unpaid carers. Some of them have unwittingly gone over the limit with their earnings, and they've been forced to now pay back sometimes thousands of pounds just for going over by a couple of pence. The total that they have to pay back the state is about £250 million, and that a lot of people are struggling with that. Would you be prepared to waive that, to let them off?
Well, look, I think it is fair that people... Look, first of all, unpaid carers do an amazing job, and that's what we recognise in the benefit system with the carers allowance, and it's gone up by, I think, £1,500 a year since Conservatives came to office. So we recognise the brilliant role they do, but it's also important to the taxpayers who pay for benefits that people only receive what they're entitled to. So what we're trying to do is to set up a system that stops people inadvertently claiming more than they should, so that they let us know earlier. So we're trying to get that system right because we want to be fair to taxpayers as well as to people who do this brilliant role in society. OK,
Chancellor, we have to leave it there. I know you have other interviews to do, but from Breakfast, thank you.
Thanks, John.